So this guy reckons that he has transcribed and learned from more than $1 billion worth of marketing. You might have heard of him. Dan Henry, he's one of the guys in the US, like the biggest funnel coach alongside like Russ Brunson. He's up there probably with Hormozi. Does about $1 to $2 million a month. He reckons he's done over $30 million through webinars and through paid presentations. I say you reckon, or like you think he has, because with all entrepreneurs, it could be higher, could be lower. I'm sure this is truthful. I've met him, he's a lovely guy. I've met his wife. They're lovely people, and they've definitely done some amazing things. And so what I want to do is I want to break down my podcast with him and see if we can bring out some of the value that he put in there. I'm also going to give some little bits of tips to you on how he performed on the podcast, because he's an ads guy, right? So we've been speaking to him a lot recently about how he can get on more podcasts, but actually how he can borrow trust. Because as ad costs keep rising, he's one of the first to say it's now more important than ever to build your own trust and to build your own authority and not rely so heavily on ads. So what I'm going to do in today's video is I've got 4 or 5 different parts from our podcast, and I'll put the podcast below. It was called Dan Henry Made $30 Million with Webinars, Learn How in 43 Minutes. If you haven't watched it, if you haven't listened to it, go ahead and watch it. I'm going to break down some of the parts and give you some of the tips of what he did, which made this episode do so well for us on our usual channels like Spotify, Apple, YouTube Music. So let's jump straight in. I've gone straight into a part about his origin story, really. I'm not really going to break down stories too much. It's more about just how he set the scene. So already we're 4 minutes in. So in our podcast, the first minute is going to be the trailer. In most episodes, there's some ads, some sponsors, a little bit of call to actions. This is really early on, right? So I've given him probably 1 or 2 key questions. The third quick key question in podcast hosting is usually one of the most important. So this one's set him up to give us a bit of background on him. And for Dan, it's really important that we understand that he came from normality, right? He's a pizza delivery guy. Now he makes millions and millions of dollars a month. He's got the biggest penthouse in Dubai Marina here. So we want to know really how we can bond to him. The first part about borrowing trust, because he's borrowing trust from my audience, is letting them buy into you. So how are you relatable to these people? So let's jump in.
I had restaurants and things like this, and I had to learn online marketing to promote those offline businesses. And so when I learned that stuff and it worked, I started looking deeper into online marketing and realized that there's actually more money if you just purely stay online and you have.
So this is really interesting. This is exactly like we had a guest called Paul Getter. If you scroll back on the podcast, he helped build Grant Cardone, Ty Lopez, and the Kardashians' personal brands, and he said a similar thing. One of his first jobs, just like Dan's, was in person, service in person, and he realized, or I think he actually was told, like Dan just said there, we need to start marketing online using some paid advertising. So they start learning a bit about paid advertising, they see it works, and then they start to think, well, how can I get rid of all the overheads, which is in the actual service delivery? How can I move the entire business online? This is what he's about to break down for us.
It's a business that's 100% online, and so that's what life was like until I really discovered the gold mine that was the online business game.
Yeah, which is actually quite interesting, right? Like you touched on the ambition piece there. You probably, when you're doing that kind of job, you don't really realize people are doing other stuff. You just think everyone's got the same job as you and it's the same life. It's interesting to me that you just touched on your dad working in the radio space, because before we just started recording, you touched on the fact that you.
So this, again, I think is really interesting, because I think a lot of us have gone through this, right? And it's so good that he brought it up, but I was able to then pivot on this. So he said, or I said, he mentioned about ambition. And what I said was that when you're doing something, whether it's if you're employed, for example, you just feel that the whole world is employed. In the same way as when you start a business, you feel like everyone is running a business. Even more than that, you feel like everyone's running the exact same business as you. And they're not, you're just in that world. And so we're about to go on this second part, which I think is really nice because he links it to, he's a very family-oriented man. He links it to his dad, right? So his dad was a caller on the radio, a radio host. And so his communication skills were brilliant. And this is where we're able to then dive into what makes Dan different. Dan's from the US, but he doesn't necessarily come across like your stereotypical American that I've interviewed. He has nuances that he's built in from himself and he's learned, but also from his dad that have helped him stand out amongst the saturated audience that is the online marketing space?
You've got a degree in sound engineering, right? So what was the link there? Was it, you're quite big on detail now, and we checked the sound before we did this, and all your webinars that we'll get into, I'm sure sound is a massive part of it. So was there a reflection from your dad's work and life?
Yeah. So my father was very good at speaking, enunciation, brevity. And when I was younger, I had a bit of a stutter, and I would talk for 5 minutes on something that I could say in 5 seconds, which obviously as time goes on and people's attention span becomes lower is a death sentence when you're doing content, when you're creating marketing. And so I actually had to learn from my father how to speak properly and not sound like this,
So that's really interesting as well, right? So what he's doing here is he's already merging what we were speaking about before, which is where he's come from, and maybe linking a bit of his family in there. He's also linking some of the things holding him back. So his stutter, his lack of confidence, and he's bringing that forward into how important communication, clarity, and simplifying your message is in marketing. He knows exactly what he wants you to believe by the end of this podcast. He needs you to know that speaking is really important, that your funnel simplicity is really important, and that effectively development and understanding your position is very important. Obviously, he's going to culminate this in we should be doing paid presentations, and we'll get to that. But I think it's very clever that right from the outset, his angle has always been, these are my issues, this is how I've overcome them, and this is how now I can make a lot of money from it. So it brings you on the journey. We're only 5 minutes in, and he's already brought you on the journey from pizza guy to getting towards, you can see that someone's going to become very wealthy and probably a millionaire. I'm going to just jump forward here slightly. Feel free to go and watch this whole episode if you're interested in these separate parts, but I've pulled out the bits that I think we need to be really focusing on. So
I will tell you.
This part is really about learning from the dead guys, right? So I'm going to skip over the bit about his dad, because you can learn about what his dad did in the episode. But here I want to talk about and listen to this part about when he started to learn from these guys, this $1 billion plus worth of marketers, and he was transcribing hundreds of books and watching Joe Rogan and making notes on every single person that was doing well. This part really stood out to me in the conversation. And again, we're only 6 minutes and 7 seconds in, and he's already giving so much value about what he did. He's making it feel like you could absolutely do this. It's nothing special. You can get there.
The most I ever learned about making money online was from dead guys.
The most I ever learned about making money online was from dead guys. That is perfect. We teach everyone in our program to speak in epiphanies. Not too many, because obviously if you just speak in epiphanies, you sound crazy. But that is an epiphany piece, which is a soundbite that we can then use to market this, and he borrows trust from our audience. The most I've ever learned about online marketing is from dead guys. That makes you go, what on earth are you talking about? He's opened the loop there. He's created intrigue. That's probably the thing that you're going to tell your partner or your friends or your parents about when you see them next. I heard this thing on a podcast recently where this guy said he learned from dead guys. That's the thing that sticks. Then you'll explain the process as he's about to do.
Guys that have been dead for decades. Jim Rohn, right? Like, I learned so much from studying marketing campaigns, old speeches and videos from people who've been dead for decades. Learned way more from that than I have from some course I bought.
What's also really key there, I think, and I really believe this, is that marketing comes full circle, right? Like storytelling now is a big thing in 2025. Storytelling was a thing if you look at marketing 500 years ago. You still had to market stuff, and they would tell stories about why it was so important to go into the British taverns on your way back from the market and you're selling your cattle. It's important. There's stories about luck and making more money and trading your coins and trading your goats and stuff. There's storytelling marketing. What he's doing here is telling you to stop. It's subtle, but he's telling you to stop looking at the new courses. He's telling you that you've already found the marketing that's going to work for you, but because we're in this dopamine age, you keep looking for the next thing. You buy a course, do part of it, move on, move on, move on. He's laying down the foundations 6 minutes into this podcast about why you should just stick to one thing. And he's going to probably, I know he's going to tell us later on, but you're maybe finding out for the first time, he's going to prove to us why to stick with his thing.
In modern day. So that was a big thing for me, is most people don't look at those sources. Like, What marketer or what person building an online business do you know that goes and transcribes 20 Jim Rohn speeches and studies patterns and uses it in the marketing? No.
Here we go. So he's started to put some of the credibility down now. He's not talking about how much money he's made yet. He's just talking about the marketers that he's learned from, who they are. And we all know people like Jim Rohn, like big guys that are really well respected. How many people have transcribed 20 Jim Rohn speeches? And he's going to value stack all these things that he's done. 100 copywriting books, like 100 Joe Rogan podcasts. You know, so many different things that you could do, especially with AI, but you're probably not going to. It gives him massive credibility from nowhere, because anyone could sit there and transcribe these things. But could you learn from transcribing as much as he has? Maybe yes, maybe no. The point is he's done it. He's proven that he can make money off the back of it. So it's probably better to just learn from him. That's a psychological trick. Not trick, that's a psychological element that he's playing there, which I think is really, really good.
Well, that's why I win. That's why I beat my competitors. That's why I'm in the top 1%, because I do the thing that most people don't do. That's how you win.
So he's saying that's why he wins. He does the different thing. I'll also say out of 110 plus guests we've had on our podcast with 3 billion plus net worth, at least, he's the only one that has given us 2 or 3 different angles to go for in a podcast. He knows going on podcasting is super valuable. He knows he makes money off the back of this. I know from speaking to him that he's got a lot of leads from going on our podcast already. And so by giving us an angle to work on, for example, making 30 million with webinars, he knows that the next podcast he goes on is not going to do the same thing, because he's going to give them a new angle. So he's constantly on this sort of cycle of podcast, giving new bits of content, saying slightly different things. Because if you don't do that, you end up speaking about very similar things, which gets your message wide, but probably not far. It's not deep. It's the same thing again and again. People get bored of that. You get fatigued. Whereas he's using this very, very strategically.
This is the bit I really want to get into as a fundamental of this conversation, because it is really interesting to me that you've become, your content's so entertaining, but you can see that you don't do it in the same way as everyone else, which is a good thing, because obviously you want to stand out, but also you understand the fundamentals. And, you know, speaking about communication there, I could almost tell that you've been trained by someone, happens to be your dad, because you don't have even the normal American upward inflection at the end of your sentences, right? So that stands you apart.
This is what I mentioned a few minutes ago. So we're at 7 minutes 8 now into the YouTube version of the podcast. It should be exactly the same, actually, thinking about it, as the audio only versions. Or the video, which is on Spotify now. Go and watch. I said that he learned from his dad. He was a radio caller, a radio host. And he doesn't have that upward inflection like most Americans. And he's going to explain now why he's fundamentally or strategically removed that from his tonality. And that's one of a number of things that he's done to make sure that he stands out, but also uses psychology of speech in the English-speaking world to give more gravitas and to signal more confidence.
From 400 million people for a start in a really crowded marketplace.
When you have an upward inflection at the end, it signals that you are unsure of what you're saying.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So you've even
you have
looked
a
at
downward inflection like that. It signals that you know what you're saying.
So I'm a big advocate for you shouldn't change your tonality too much when you speak. Big advocate for that, because, for example, if you watch my videos, if you listen to my podcast and I speak like this, I speak with a British accent from a certain area, southwest of England. I speak relatively quickly like my father does, like his father does. If I come onto a podcast or do a keynote speech or go onto your podcast and I speak really slowly like this, or I change my accent slightly, you're like, what is this guy doing? This is not him, it's not authentic. So what Dan's done here cleverly is he's not changed his tonality too much. He still speaks in the same way, same speed, same cadence, same vocabulary. He's just changed the inflection. So for Brits like myself, we don't have the upward inflection at the end. We already speak in a way that you could say signals confidence. Whereas Americans speak with an upward inflection at the end, which shows that they might not be confident. It sounds like you're asking a question every time. Terrible example. I do apologize if you're from the US. But my point is, or his point actually, is super valid. And we teach everyone on our program to use exactly what he's talking about here. It's a lot easier said than done. I just did an upward inflection then, if you recognize that. It's a lot easier said than done, because if it's something that you've always used, it's you're not even going to hear it for a while. But you listen to the best people in the world at borrowing trust, and they are speaking in a way that makes you feel like you can literally lean in and believe them straight away.
Gives you confidence.
It creates the perception of confidence.
So it stops you from sounding like you're asking a question.
Right. Exactly.
So
really important. I think that's really important there. So I said, gives you confidence, and I think it does, but he said signals confidence. And actually it's a combination of both. If you know you're speaking in a way that is conveying a message that you believe and it is true and you have the value to prove it, you're going to have confidence, you're delivering it in a malleable way. He's saying it signals confidence. That's probably because he's got a US, he's hearing it from a US point of view. So he knows everyone speaks with an upward inflection in the US. If he speaks with a downward inflection, he stands out, he sounds more confident. Just different nuances. So you need to know that when you're looking at going on different podcasts or speaking at different locations around the world. We obviously target podcasts with what we do, but actually this part is performing in general. So let's skip forward ever so slightly. I'm going to go to just after 8 minutes. Just after 8 minutes here, and we're doing a talk about prepping for the next upsell. So we're always being prepared for an upsell, which is not necessarily what we want.
Most people sell you these marketing courses not to teach you the actual stuff, but to prep you for the next purchase. And then that purchase preps you for the next purpose. A classic example of this actually, in a non-marketing related world, is Tony Robbins. Every single event you attend from Tony Robbins goes up in price. And that event, as much as you might feel like it's pure value, it's not. It is a choreographed, long form, paid sales presentation that gets you to buy the next thing, all the way up to his platinum partners thing that's like whatever, 85 or 150 grand.
Okay, so what he's saying here is just modern day marketing, isn't it? So we've all been taught funnels. Hopefully you're using some funnels in your business, but everyone knows that it's probably going to be a step-by-step process. You've got to test different ones, but most people, especially online businesses, are going to try and upsell you, so move you from next to next to next. But what he's saying here is that when you buy a course or a program, usually that part of the program is not set up to actually solve a problem. It's set up to get you partway through solving your problem and then open your eyes to the other 25 problems you actually have or are going to have, so they can then prep or push you towards the next upsell. Again, from a performance point of view for him on my podcast, I know that he doesn't have that in his business. So he's already pointing out things that other people are doing wrong and that he does right. So you can come onto his program very cheap and stay there very cheap, or you can buy something that's very big and it solves an entire problem. You can then move around, but it's not necessarily a step-by-step funnel, which is a really different way of doing it, because someone like Russ Brunson would literally move you up through. So he's like, you need to move upwards, solve a specific problem, open their eyes to the next one. So he's giving a contrary opinion to other people that we already know. So he's borrowing trust. He's also then manipulating trust. The other thing I want to mention there is what he mentioned, which is he put Tony Robbins' name to this. And this is going to become very important later on, because remember, this podcast angle was Dan Henry made $30 million with webinars. What's a webinar? Okay, his webinars are paid, so they're paid presentations. He's just used the Tony Robbins example, the most well-known, the wealthiest life coach ever. And he's giving you examples of how his process moves you along step by step. But in your mind, you're going, okay, that's a really valid and credible example, because Tony Robbins makes a lot of money. We know really what he does, who he is. Everyone respects him. So later on, when he comes back round to this full circle, it's going to make a lot more sense. Let me just jump forward again. So we're going to go to about 10 minutes 30 if you're following along doing this yourself. So here, in fact, I'll let it play and then I'll explain.
And I was like, hey, I want to buy your mastermind. And he's like, well, you should buy the $6,000 group coaching first. I was like, why?
So just to set the scene here, he's talking about Sam Ovens, the guy who created School and is now obviously co-founder of Alex Hormozi for the School software and community. So what he's saying is, he's giving you an example of how he was pushed up a sales funnel by someone that is very well known. Let me just replay that slightly.
It's going to be the same stuff. I'm just going to spend more time with you, not hold something back so that you'll make another purchase.
Yeah, because your stuff seems really transparent, right? You literally say up front, like, this is how much you can pay to start with, and then there's other things inside that you can buy.
Yeah, I'm not... because I hated that so much when I was buying stuff. Like, I remember one time I reached out to Sam Ovens years ago, and I was like, hey, I want to buy your mastermind. And he's like, well, you should buy the $6,000 group coaching first. I was like, why? And then he's like, well, because, you know, I think you should buy that and then buy this. And I was like, that's weird. I want to give you 30 grand.
So this is exactly the same as what he did with us. So he wanted to buy our program, which is in like the 5 figures range. And then he decided to change his mind and go for like $20,000, $30,000. He wanted to go for the one-on-one. He wanted to learn straight away, which I think is really interesting. Ours is very similar to his, right? So when you come and work with us, we solve an entire problem. It then just depends on different levels of what you actually want to achieve. Do you want to do it really quickly? Do you want to be in a community setting? Do you want extra help? Similar to his, we want to solve the entire problem. We want to give you like as much access to us and the team as possible. We want to make sure that you're able to get one-on-one time as fast or as flexibly as possible. And you've also got recorded stuff on the side. If, like him, you want to come in and just go, I want to watch this all over a weekend and get this done. But he doesn't want to spend 5 or 10K. He wants to spend 20, 30, 40 and get it done now and have a lot of value, a lot of face-to-face time. It's exactly what he did with us. So this is the Sam Ovens example. He's actually giving examples here of being burnt. He doesn't like the cheap $800 to $1,000 community stuff because he feels like that is literally a lead magnet. It's just a high-paid lead magnet.
Why don't you just take it, you know? So I'm like, fine. So I buy the $6,000 thing. I log into one video, and it's 45 minutes of Sam talking about quantum physics for a landing page. And I'm like, this is not going to work for me. I love Sam. I love Sam. He's amazing. He's brilliant, but it's not going to work for me. So I messaged him back. I'm like, dude, just let me give you the 30 grand. I'm not going to watch these videos. I'm just being honest with you. But if I fly to New York and I sit in your office, I will pay attention for 2 days, but I will not watch this video. I know myself.
So that's interesting, right? Because some of the stuff that I really like that you do is the live selling, the live presenting, right? So you touched on Tony Robbins. And is that the way that you learn then? You'd rather go to Sam's office and have him talk to you?
So basically he's saying he doesn't want to do the core stuff, he wants to learn immediately. So I agree, some of the frustration that I have with programs or mentors is when they're like, here's a 12-week program and you log in on week 1 and they'll tell you one part and then you have to come back next week. A lot of people who are short on time will just want to get a result straight away. They want maybe some support, definitely some one-to-one, but you also want you want to be able to access everything now. Like if I've decided on a Thursday, or like Dan said there, decided on a Friday night that you want to learn something, you want access to everything over a weekend. And he will happily spend 30 or 40K, fly to the other side of the country and learn from you face to face rather than sit for 6 months on a program. I think that's a really interesting takeaway for any people watching this who have online communities or online programs, because people learn in such different ways. It doesn't mean you need to charge more, charge less, or even move it around. You just need to have options for everyone who learns in different ways. Okay, cool. Let's jump a little bit forward. This part I think is quite key, because he's actually going to talk about how if you want to help someone, just show them that you can and actually help. Whereas most people try and get too caught up in their own funnel and get confused.
For me, what I do is I like to show people that I can help them in a way that gets them a result that makes them want to do the next thing. So there's 2 ways to do this. You can sell in a way that holds something back so that you can sell them the next thing, or you can sell in a way that gets someone a result that inspires them to want to do it at the next level or a higher level.
So this is kind of classic funnel building. You've probably heard this before, but it's just an interesting way of putting it. So rather than just getting someone to go through a funnel by making things exciting, you actually solve a full and remarkable problem. You solve a problem with a full and remarkable solution. Mentors like Dan Priestley say exactly the same thing. Alex Hormozi, exactly the same thing. Get a lead magnet or something that's small and inexpensive to solve an entire problem. Then that will spark the trust that they can then go up through your funnel, rather than just making it exciting. Oh, look at these value stacks. This is worth 25 million pounds or dollars. Buy this, it's now free. That will get people in, but it's the wrong people.
So for instance, sometimes I'll do this live event called the Epic Pitch Challenge. Well, what I do is I show people by the end of that event that they can create a offer and a message that they can repurpose into multiple types of marketing. Because what most people don't realize about marketing is ads, emails, VSLs, webinars, all of these forms of marketing. Once you create one single solitary message, that message is repurposed. It's sort of like a hit song, right? You can play a hit song on a guitar, on a piano.
So he's getting really good here. So he's talking about positioning and messaging, which is obviously really, really key to marketing. He's getting really good at podcast guesting as well. He's going to get better over the next couple of months as we work with him. But what he's done there is he's laid out something that is a problem with the core side of things. He's then put in place what he does, so solving the quick solution. He's then giving you like sound bites, basically. He's giving you, it's like this. He's giving you metaphors. He's giving you examples, different ways to think about it, because it's unlikely that someone is sat here listening or watching like I am. Podcasts, we're usually walking around, we're in the gym, where you might have it on the background on the TV, or when you're cooking or cycling or running, whatever. So you need to say things again and again and again. And so what he's doing there is giving you different examples, because these examples will resonate with different people, men and women, and different age groups, whether you're into this hobby or this hobby, will all resonate with different examples you're giving. So he's saying the same thing, but he's giving these examples that will link to different people. Really good point there. And he's getting really good at this, which is awesome. It's not surprising either, is it? Okay, let's jump forward a little bit. So this part here is about, again, about messaging, but more about your top of funnel messaging, which I think is really good. I think we put it in our trailer, actually, because people just don't seem to get this part, and I knew Dan would be a good person to talk about this.
Exactly. So how do you make something exciting?
How do you make something exciting? We're talking about the offers. This is my question.
So the fastest way to become a millionaire is to sell what everyone else is selling and just make it sound new and unique.
Fastest way to become a millionaire is to sell what everyone else is selling, but make it sound new and unique. So again, he's making your business sound easy. He's making the whole journey sound really easy. Sell the same thing, so you've already got demand. Just make it sound new. Use a unique mechanism. Sounds really, really simple, right? Marketing is simple, but obviously it's different ways to do it.
Because at the end of the day, we're selling three things. I don't care what you think you sell.
I don't care what you think you sell. That's a really good, that's almost an epiphany, but it's definitely a soundbite. This is in our trailer as well.
You sell three things. You either sell health, wealth, or happiness.
Health, wealth, or happiness. That's all that we sell. That's all that anyone sells. And so really, marketing is about who can make it sound the best. I'm going to leave it there because he goes into a lot of depth, but that's the soundbite that we used in our trailer. When we did all the testing, that was the part we were like, people resonated most with. Because I think we know that. We know people sell health, wealth, and happiness. But when you hear someone high level say it, you're like, okay, I should probably trust this person a little bit more. Let's jump forward. I've not got much left for you because there's just so much value in this episode that I don't want to give you too much. I want you to go and watch this.
Right. And here's all the reasons why. And presentations are amazing because, people are locked in and they're listening and you have time to sell them. This is all me trying to convince you. But if I were to say something like...
So just to set the scene here, he's talking about epic pitch, and the I for epic stands for irrefutable. So he's trying to give me examples of irrefutable proof or trust building that I, if I'm pretending to be a prospect, can't deny. So he's going to give us examples here of how to do this, how to make people believe in what you're selling.
What is the most valuable computer company of all time?
NVIDIA, Apple.
Apple,
Yeah.
Okay. And now who sold Apple to the world?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. What did Steve Jobs do every single year to sell more Apple?
Presented new stuff.
He did a presentation, okay? Now, notice that in that sequence, I asked you what the most valuable tech company was. You said Apple. I asked you who sold it. You said Steve Jobs. I asked you what he did every year. You said presentation. So I am not saying anything because you're not going to believe me. You're going to believe you. Now, you layer that. So for instance, would you agree that life coaches are probably one of the most brokest coaches?
Yeah.
But did you know there is a billionaire life coach? Do you know who that is?
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
There you go. So we're going to layer it. So irrefutable proof. Steve Jobs did every single year a presentation, a paid presentation. I don't know if it was always paid, but I think to get to the live one was paid, but the rest of it obviously was free. every year when he was building up Apple. I can't deny that. In fact, I said it on the podcast. He asked me the question, what's the most valuable computer company? Apple. What did the leader do? What did Steve Jobs do every single year? I said he did presentations. His then example, which we spoke about earlier, he's brought back Tony Robbins. So we've already spoke about how amazing Tony Robbins is. He's now brought him back in and he's explaining here that he does presentations, paid presentations. That's exactly how he's building irrefutable proof, because he's getting me to answer the questions and linking it exactly to what he sells.
Does Tony Robbins sell
Oh, no way.
life coaching?
Presentations.
Yeah. Again, so you layer that. At no point did I tell you.
And of course, he's talking about layering it. So he gives multiple examples. He doesn't just let me go Apple and then I've won. He doesn't just go Tony Robbins and then I think I've won. I get the answers, I'm correct. He keeps going until I get the point that paid presentations are the way forward if you want to grow your business quickly and rapidly, in his opinion. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. Cool. Okay, let's just jump forward a little bit here. So he spoke a little bit about podcasts because he's done a lot of research onto Joe Rogan's podcast. And so I think this part as well for us in the podcast space is really interesting to watch. So about 38 and a half minutes in, he's talking about controlling silence.
I love that. But I was reading a thing the other day about podcasting, and someone had analysed the best podcasters. And, this is arguable if you think he's the best or not, but Joe Rogan probably makes the most out of podcasting. And people, the analysis was like, if you listen to his podcast, he controls the silence better than anyone else. Yes, he speaks slowly and he has fun topics or good guests, whatever, but he'll have massive pauses. He thinks and then he puts something to the guest. He's not rushing through. He's not trying to self-promote. And even in the example you just gave there, or in any of the content that you do a very similar thing where you completely control how the information is being given across. And it, like you say, it's so captivating.
He earns that time. He also speaks at a reading level generally of grade 6 to 7. He keeps things short and concise, and he asks thought-provoking.
So do you see what he's doing here? So I spoke about Joe Rogan, about how he controls the silence, has good guests, and how he's doing really well as a podcaster. Dan is now matching me. So he's speaking slower, he's speaking as clearly as possible, and he's analysing what I'm saying. So he's giving answers to what I said. I gave an example of a document where Joe Rogan has been analysed as one of the best podcasters. I know that Dan has analysed at least 10 or 20 episodes of his podcast, Rogan's podcast. He's broken down that he earns the time. Rogan earns the time because he's done this podcasting game for 15 plus years. He speaks at a grade 6 or 7. He never uses big words because he knows that trips up his audience. He's very short and concise in what he says. He asks very thought-provoking questions. And the most important part is he opens and closes the loops. You see lots of memes on Rogan, right? And it's the same with paid presentations, which is why we got onto this subject. As soon as a question is asked and the answer is fulfilled, Rogan or good podcasters will use the story arc to open a new one. So just when you go, oh, that makes sense, they go, oh, what about this? And as a guest, it's really important that you understand that. And Dan understood this perfectly because I'm opening the loop here in a weird example because we're talking about the same thing that we're doing. But I open the loop by putting to the table, Joe Rogan's a great podcaster. He controls the silence. In your mind, you then go, oh, how does he control the silence? How is he controlling the time that he has with the guest? Dan's then answered them by saying what I just said, speak at grade 7, short and concise, thought-provoking questions, opening and closing the loop. Inherently they're closing our loop and then he'll open it again.
Thought-provoking questions that, this is why you can watch a Joe Rogan podcast for 3 hours and you just don't want to log off. Constant opening and closing of loops. And I don't know if he does this naturally or if he learned it from somebody, but it's exactly what he does.
Have you transcribed his podcast to learn from that?
I have done some Joe Rogan stuff.
See? So we talked about opening and closing loops, then I opened the loop again. Have you transcribed his stuff? And we're going to go on there right at the end of the podcast here to talk a little bit about the full circle of this episode with Dan, because we went full circle from relationships. So very cleverly, he, with his angle setting and maybe a little bit of our story arcing, we started on relationships with his father, relationship with money, relationship as a pizza delivery driver, so relationship with blue collar work. right through his journey back to the end where it was relationships again. So he's talking about his dad, he's talking a little bit about people that he spends time with and what he spends time with, who he spends time with, his wife and the business that he's growing. I think that was really interesting. If you haven't listened to this, go and listen, because I want to do more of these breakdowns where we take these top amazing guests, talk about what they're teaching us, but also how they're delivering it, because we can all learn from this. Everyone on our program will have a deep, insightful look at this episode, because there's so much you can learn. Yes, what he said was valuable, but how he did it is how we will take the next steps to borrow trust on podcasts across the globe. I hope that was helpful. If you've got any questions, stick it into the comments below and I'll make sure that I answer them all for you. See you in the next one.